Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Encourage Mindset. I'm your host, Ethan Vandehyve. And today I have an exciting guest along with me today, diving into some awesome topics, obviously mindset and motivation, but I think he has a hidden gem for us that he's going to talk about too. So, Mike, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about your story. And I think there's a hidden gem that we all want to hear as well.
Well, Ethan, first of all, thank you very much for having me on the show. I really appreciate your theme, the encourage mindset. We live in a world that sometimes gets very divisive, and for anybody, and you especially, promoting that encouragement, I think is fabulous. So for all listeners out there, I am a lifelong higher education. I was a college football coach. I was an instructor, taught people to be PE teachers. And then I also ended up in administration. And through all that time, there was really one consistent theme that I kept going back to, and that was leadership. Because, and it has started with a great phrase: you lead people, you manage things. Well, I was in a people business, so it really made sense to learn about leadership. And so I was constantly doing that. And then curveballs got thrown. And two big curveballs came into my life. In 2010, I'm standing on the sideline of a football game. I'm the head football coach at Luther College in Iowa. And we have a young man who is a freshman running down the field on a kickoff. It's in the third quarter. And he goes in to make the tackle, and you kind of half see it, and I'm kind of half turning, ready to get on to the next phase. And all of a sudden, that young man is lying motionless on the ground.
Wow.
And continue to lie motionless. And I remember walking on the field. The trainers were already there. And he was conscious, but he had no feeling anywhere. And, you know, you're trying to be calm, collective, in a state of chaos that has just happened. The stadium had gone perfectly silent. In a few minutes, his parents had walked down to the field. They had come to the game and found out within the course of that afternoon, later that afternoon, that evening, that he had fractured C3 and C4. And they gave him a 3% chance any movement below the neck. And
Wow.
this is a young man. Now you think, okay, how does this affect everybody? And there's no doubt it has affected Chris's life. Chris Norton is the young man's name. It's a great story. There's actually a documentary movie on his story, which is my claim to fame. My kids love it. Their dear old dad was on Netflix at one point.
Wow.
But here's this, the situation is such, as every college coach does. You promise those parents, and I especially remember his mom being at lunch when we were recruiting, saying, "I'm going to take care of your son," and then they have to walk into a waiting room in Rochester at Mayo Clinic, knowing that their son is lying there with this kind of diagnosis. And I still remember, I wasn't sure what was going to happen that day, Ethan. It was like, all right, is she going to turn around and hit me? Is she going to start cursing me out? And all she did was turn around and say, "Mike, they're saying a 3% chance, but we're going to believe in that 3%. Life throws curveballs, but how you have a mindset to go forward is so important. And that really taught me what I was doing and trying to learn and implement within teams and working with people. I needed to take it to another level.
Yeah. Mike, question for you. So you talked to me before we started this show. We were both men of faith. How did this moment as a coach and as a person, and we're all sinners, how did this challenge your faith?
Well, we always ask that question, why?
Mm-hmm.
And I just heard a minister the other day talking about, that great question, why do bad things happen to good people? And Chris was one of these great people. His family, or the great family, built upon faith and family and everything they do. And why can this happen? All right. But here's what Chris amplified, his family amplified, and what really transcended across our whole team was the fact that this was going to lead to something even greater. Yes, the situation was tragic, but no doubt the family, Chris and the family, never allowed it to become a tragedy. And it was through faith that there was a higher calling, there was a higher purpose involved. And I'm going to fast forward real quick. Now we're sitting here in 2025, and the Chris Norton Foundation, through these years, started in 2012, has raised over $2 million for people with spinal cord injuries or neuromuscular challenges.
Wow, incredible.
We do grants, and then we also sponsor a wheelchair camp. So that was a defining moment. And I talk about, as I'm going to get into, there are crucible moments in everybody's lives. Sometimes they're large. Okay, 9/11 was a crucible moment in the lives of so many, especially leadership. COVID was a crucible moment. And so we all have these crucible moments. My next one was back in 2017. I got an email from the president's office at the University of Dubuque. I was over there at that time, and I was assistant head football coach. And the president wanted to see me. Okay. Now, this was like 2 rungs up from where I was from a reporting standpoint. Mm-hmm. And I remember walking in his office, and here was this, Ethan, you're going to love this. Here was the start of the conversation. Mike, how would you like to do the university a favor? So as you can well imagine, you basically have 2 choices. You're going to say, I think I'm going to look for a job somewhere else. Yeah. Or you say yes. And what he wanted me to do was get completely out of coaching. He goes, I want you to be in charge. I want you to serve on my cabinet, and you're in charge of student life on our campus. And I said, Jeff, my training is all, teaching and coaching and athletic administration, but this is a whole new world. He goes, I don't care. He goes, I know how you believe. I know what you stand for. I know how you organize your thoughts. You're the person I want in this job. And that was another crucible moment, especially considering that in the 48 hours after I got named to the position, I had a sexual assault case that happened on campus, and I had a racial incident that happened on campus.
Wow.
So I had to this is what really got me thinking about the whole aspect of leadership is more than just all the little plans and all the little fancy things people do. There's a foundation there that has to be. And that's where I really came in to develop what I call my handful of L's, which is how to lead yourself, and then when applicable, lead others. And that's where that work came. And the very first L, when we get to the faith-based part, the very first L on the handful of L's, mm-hmm. Continue to learn. And as I looked at that, and I started thinking, what am I doing to model that? So here I am. I'm probably within 4 years of retiring, 4 or 5 years of retiring from higher education. And I go ahead and I start a doctorate of ministry program because there was such a similarity between what I had learned from secular leadership foundations, faith-based leadership foundations, and this kind of wrapped everything together. So it was probably one of the smartest things I ever did. I've done a lot of dumb things in my life, but that was probably one of the smartest things I ever did, because it really then lent itself to really expanding upon these handful of L's.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So following the handful of L's, you talked a little bit about this foundation process. Is this something that you had to motivate yourself to acquire, or is this something that, you felt like you naturally had because you were a coach and you were, you know, developing kids at a young age and trying to be better? So is this something when you stepped into that, you had to motivate yourself, or did you feel like you already had it?
I think it was a combination of both, Ethan. And one of the things, the coaching part really helped me with this because, I was reading all these things. There's all kinds of literature about the latest techniques of leadership and the things to focus on and how do you look at strategy and how do you plan strategy and how do you plan execution. The whole topic of now is coming with emotional intelligence. All those things are great, but what's the foundation? And in coaching, every year, and I'll give you the great example. I use this all the time when I talk. Okay, day one of pads. I don't care if you're in high school football, college football, the NFL. You work tackling drills. The simple foundational piece of football called tackling. It doesn't matter what you've learned before, and if you've learned it really well, you're still going to start with that foundation. And that's what led me to say, what is the foundation of leadership? So that's where the handful of L's came in. I started looking at what is the real foundation that you build upon to develop a mindset to lead yourself and lead others. So that's where I came in, the handful of L's, and that basically is, continue to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You want to continue to laugh. And I use the word laugh as find joy and happiness, rest and recharge. Okay. You need to continue to live. There's a great quote, Teddy Roosevelt, Man in the Arena. Okay. Not the critic accounts, and I'm not going to go into the rest of it right now. But you need to be in the arena. You can't just sit on the sidelines. And there really is, and I thought about it from a coaching perspective. Okay, how do you define a champion? Okay, a champion, a lot of times we think of championships, win the league, all those things, Super Bowl. Okay, but really and truly, a true champion is a person who's ready and willing to step in the arena, willing to put on that uniform. And so as a leader, you need to be ready to step in there, knowing that setbacks and challenges are inevitable. They're going to happen. None of us are perfect, and we're going to have things happen. So, but you need to be willing to live. Okay. And I did do a little stunt to really promote that when I was developing all this, because I have a fear of heights. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm one of those guys
most people do.
All right, you're in that glass elevator in the hotel. I'm the person who stands next to the door. All right, not the glass. But then again, I have jumped out of a perfectly good airplane twice. So I've done that, and that was to kind of say I'm going to live, as opposed to just be in here. And then the fourth L is continue to love, and I think that is how we treat others, and that comes from my faith base. I believe in the great commandment: love God, love others. And so what are we doing? How do we treat employees? How do we treat our coworkers? How do we treat the person on the street? We need to treat them with that kindness and compassion and empathy. All the aspects that emotional intelligence will help us with, but you really need to start with that basis of love. And so those are my handful of L's. And then there is a bonus L. Okay, Ethan. So I want to make sure, our listeners have this bonus L. Because if you do the 4, you continue to learn, you continue to laugh, you continue to live, and you continue to love, you open your mind and your heart and your soul to not only leaving a legacy, but more importantly, having a legacy left upon you. And so the bonus L is legacy.
Okay, I like it. I would say I'm going to challenge you to add another L to your handful of L's here. And I would add listen. And when I add listen, I mean like actually listening, actually, true, like you said, wanting to care and show love. Like this is the type of listening I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love those L's. I think those are tremendously helpful to leadership in identifying what a leader should be or is, or what they want to accomplish out of being a leader. And I'm looking behind you and I see a leader that everybody, as myself included, as a big Packer fan, is aware of, because he left his legacy and was a true leader.
Yeah, Lombardi, I have multiple books around here on Lombardi, and actually through my career, actually met people that actually worked for him.
Very
and
cool.
It was really interesting. And what, the image of Lombardi for so many is this tough, gruff guy who, just got after people. But when you find out more about the person, okay, well, one, he went to church every day. Okay. He was one of the nicest people to servers and waiters at restaurants and wherever people,
Mm-hmm.
the people know him, talk about these stories. The other thing is he really did care about the players. And that was really neat to learn. And I think he modeled, there's a great quote many people have used through the years. I have used it myself. People don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Ooh.
So let me repeat that. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. And you talked about listening. I agree with you, because when I talk about the L's, I interject the listening, because I talk about listening being a sponge as opposed to a brick. Okay. So if you're listening as a brick, when water falls on a brick, what happens? It just scatters.
Yep.
Water falls on a sponge. The sponge takes it in. We need to be sponges. In part of learning is through conversations, not just books. Okay. We have lots of great ways to learn. We have books. We have TED Talks. We have podcasts. We have,
we have speakers. We got
speakers. You got all this going on.
Yeah.
But great learning comes in conversation.
Totally agree with you there. That's why shooting podcasts like this are so fun, because you get to meet another individual that is, seen a different part of the world. And that's where I kind of wanted to change the subject a little bit and dive into what you call lead through. What do you say here? You're breaking down walls. You lead through a chaotic world. So tell me a little bit about that before we leave this episode today. What does that segment mean to you?
The walls represent the setbacks and challenges that we face as we go on our paths. They're going to happen to everybody. It could be a family member getting ill, passing away. We lose a job. We lose a bunch of sales. Whatever the case may be, the walls are going to be there, okay? And the chaotic world is, we have this chaos happening, but we're trying to bring order at the same time. And to me, to do that, you need to be able to, and as I talk to people, stay calm, embrace the walls, not that you have to like them, all right? Because, like when I talk about the great commandment, love God, love others, loving is required, liking is not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So you don't have to like that you're going through a bad situation. Just embrace it for what it is. It is a situation. It is life. And we have experiences, and we're going to learn from these experiences. So you need to stay calm. You're going to need others. None of us do this alone in our world. And you're going to need others to help you. You're going to need others to encourage you. You're going to have to be that person to help somebody else. You're going to have to be that encourager. We all have multiple hats to wear in this arena of life. So you're going to need others. Then you need a mindset. You need to have something to hang your hat on. For me, I talk about being 1-0 every day in every way, which is defined as living life, creating a transformation of self and others to be better. That's my address. Okay, that's my address on that house that I'm building, that foundation of Handful of L's, and that needs to be there. And then I'm going to share one last thing.
Absolutely,
is because I talk about this. We use the word journey so often. Okay, leadership books use it all the time, and I'm not opposed to the word, but I believe there's a better word, and that better word is pilgrimage. Because, see, a pilgrimage, strictly defined, means an experience that brings new and expanded meaning to our lives. And if you think about it, that's what we're really doing. We're not just taking a trip from A to B. We are living experiences. And when we allow those experiences, even the setbacks and challenges that happen in our lives, when we allow those experiences to bring us new and expanded meaning, boy, we're living a life well lived.
Absolutely. I love the way you portrayed that, because I guess, I always thought of a journey, something that takes time, but yeah, it's like A to B. You eventually get there and then you stop, right? And, that's the way I'm sure most listeners probably assume, what their life feels like. It's, you start from birth is A, and B is, go a long way till you pass. So it's awesome to hear the new word pilgrimage. I really love that and appreciate that. And there you go. I used some L's right there for you, the handful of L's. But thank you so much for coming on today, Mike. It's been an inspiring podcast to listen to, and I'm sure many listeners will enjoy this episode.
Well, Ethan, it's been my pleasure. I really have appreciated the opportunity to speak with you. And like I said earlier, I love how you have named this podcast Encourage Mindset, because so much comes down to our mindset each and every day. And I know every guest you have on here is helping you spread that word about mindset. And so I applaud you for what you're doing, and look forward to future conversations.
Absolutely.